You won't believe what happens when two teen cousins in first-class Christmas uniforms face a jealous, racist passenger on a flight. The mean woman thinks she can bully them, but she has no idea who's really watching. Will these 14-year-olds survive her cruel attacks, or is their holiday ruined before it even begins? Watch as courage, family, and a secret guardian turn the tables in the most shocking way. Like if you're ready to see justice served, subscribe for more unbelievable stories. Comment who you think stood up the best, and share this with friends who need a Christmas miracle they won't forget. The hum of the airplane engines was almost soothing, a low, steady vibration beneath the polished seats of first class. Sunlight filtered through the large windows, casting a warm, golden glow across the cabin. Jalen adjusted the strap of his Christmas-themed uniform, his small hands fiddling nervously with the shiny gold buttons of his red blazer. Beside him, Ethan, his white cousin, leaned back with the ease of someone used to luxury, the seat practically engulfing his tall frame. Both of them were only 14, but their first-class experience made them feel older somehow, as if they had stepped into a world far above the hustle and chaos of ordinary life. Relax, Jay, Ethan whispered, nudging him gently. It's just a flight. Nothing scary here. Jalen nodded, though his stomach still twisted with the butterflies of anticipation. This wasn't just any flight. It was a Christmas trip across the country to spend the holidays with their guardian, Adrian. The airline had provided first-class accommodations at Adrian's insistence, ensuring that his young wards traveled in absolute comfort. But comfort, Jalen was learning, didn't always protect you from the cruelty of people across the aisle. A woman in her late 20s, with perfectly coiffed hair and a tight, tailored business outfit, watched them like a hawk. Vanessa Hale, Jalen, had noticed her stare as soon as they boarded, a subtle narrowing of her icy blue eyes that made him want to shrink into his seat. There was something sharp about the way she assessed them, something that didn't belong on a plane, something venomous. Ethan followed his cousin's gaze. Yeah, she's definitely judging us, he muttered under his breath, a half-smile tugging at his lips. There was no fear in his tone, just annoyance, bordering on amusement. He had a protective streak, especially when it came to Jalen, and he could sense that Vanessa's gaze wasn't harmless. The first few minutes of the flight passed in polite, almost ceremonial silence. Flight attendants moved gracefully between the rows, offering champagne and warm smiles. Sienna, the young woman assigned to their section, had a calm, confident aura. Her dark hair neatly pulled back into a bun, eyes scanning the cabin with a practiced precision. There was something about her that made both boys feel safe, though they hadn't yet realized why. Sienna was not just a flight attendant. She had been carefully chosen by Adrian to watch over them. Vanessa's first move came subtly. She let out an exaggerated sigh, loud enough for Jalen to hear. "Oh, look at them," she said, her tone dripping with thinly veiled scorn. In their little Christmas outfits, sitting here like they own the place. Ridiculous. Jalen stiffened, heat rising to his cheeks. He looked down at his uniform, trying to ignore the sting in her words. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Excuse me," he said smoothly, leaning slightly toward her. Vanessa ignored him, continuing her low murmurs of derision. Glancing around to make sure others in first class could hear her, by the time the flight had reached its cruising altitude, Vanessa's behavior escalated. She began making louder comments, mocking their uniforms, calling Jalen costume kid under her breath, and laughing in a way that was designed to humiliate. Jalen felt the familiar mix of anger and fear bubble inside him. He wanted to shrink away, to disappear into his seat, but Ethan's presence steadied him. His cousin's gaze was firm, protective, daring Vanessa to take it further. Sienna, observing from a distance, remained calm, though a subtle tightening around her eyes betrayed her growing irritation. She didn't yet intervene. She was gathering information, waiting for the right moment. She had been trained for this, to deal with unruly passengers, especially those who posed a threat to the children under her supervision. Vanessa's cruelty grew bolder. She leaned slightly toward them, lowering her voice so only Jalen and Ethan could hear. "You think you belong here? Kids like you don't belong in first class. Look at you, playing dress-up, while the rest of us live real lives." Her words carried the weight of something deeper than just jealousy, entitlement, and a sense of superiority that had no place in a confined cabin, full of strangers, Jalen, single quotes as hands clenched into fists under the tray table. He wanted to speak up, to defend himself, but the fear of causing a scene made his voice falter. Ethan, however, had already made a decision. He leaned back, a sly grin forming, and whispered to Jalen, "Don't worry, I've got this." Before Vanessa could continue her tirade, Sienna approached, her movements smooth and deliberate. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice polite but firm. Vanessa turned, her smile faltering. "Yes," she replied, attempting to mask the irritation in her tone. "These young gentlemen are my responsibility during this flight," Sienna continued. "I would appreciate it if you treated them with the respect any passenger deserves. If there's an issue, I can address it with the proper authorities." Vanessa's blue eyes flashed with indignation. "Oh, come on, I was just making an observation. I can say whatever I like." Sienna's gaze didn't waver. "Observations that harass or demean others are not acceptable on this flight. Please consider this a formal warning." She turned and walked back toward the boys, keeping a careful eye on Vanessa as she resumed her seat. Jalen let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Thank you," he whispered to Sienna, his voice small but sincere. Ethan nudged him with a wink. "See, told you, she's not getting away with it." For the next hour, the tension in the cabin simmered. Vanessa's anger was palpable, though she restrained herself after Sienna's intervention. Every now and then, she would shoot a look at the boys, lips curling in silent malice, but she no longer dared to speak out loud. The boys tried to focus on the festive decorations around the cabin, the little Christmas trees and twinkling lights that made the environment feel warmer and safer. Jalen's eyes wandered to the small gift bag Sienna had placed in front of them, a thoughtful gesture from Adrian Hove, filled with holiday treats, puzzles, and a small note encouraging them to enjoy the flight. For a brief moment, the outside world and Vanessa's malice faded, replaced by the comfort of family and protection. Ethan leaned closer to Jalen. "This isn't just about the outfits. She's jealous. People like her see kids enjoying life, and they can't handle it." Jalen nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess you're right still. It hurts." Ethan put a reassuring hand on his cousin's shoulder. "I know, but look at Sienna. She's got our backs. And trust me, Vanessa has no idea what she's dealing with." As the plane soared over the snowy landscape, sunlight bouncing off the clouds below, a quiet confidence began to settle over Jalen. He realized that even though Vanessa tried to make them feel small, he wasn't alone. He had Ethan beside him, protective and unwavering, and Sienna watching over them with quiet authority. The bullying might not be over, but the battle lines were clear and they were not powerless. Outside, the world was a blur of white and gold. Snow-covered fields and frost-specked trees, stretching as far as the eye could see. Inside, the tension lingered, but the first real glimmer of hope had appeared. Jalen allowed himself to imagine the rest of the flight in a new way, not just as a journey to a destination, but as the start of a story where he and Ethan were not victims, but players capable of standing up to cruelty. Vanessa, meanwhile, sat fuming quietly, her fingers drumming against her armrest. She had underestimated these two children, underestimated the authority that watched over them, and underestimated the strength that came from family bonds. She didn't know it yet, but her Christmas flight was about to go very differently from the one she had imagined. The first hour passed in a tense mixture of silence and careful observation. Every small gesture, every glance from Vanessa was catalogued by Sienna. She had been briefed extensively by Adrian, aware of Vanessa's personality and potential threat level. Her training told her to be patient, to wait for the exact moment when intervention would be most effective. Ensuring the safety of the children while teaching Vanessa a lesson she would never forget. Jalen felt the warmth of Ethan's confidence beside him, and, for the first time since boarding, he began to relax. He was still wary, still aware of Vanessa's presence, but he felt empowered, knowing he wasn't alone. A sense of camaraderie, of solidarity, spread between the cousins, a bond forged not just by family, but by the shared experience of standing against unprovoked cruelty. Outside, the clouds shimmered with the reflection of the winter sun. Inside, the cabin was filled with the quiet tension of a battle, unspoken but deeply felt. And while the next hours of the flight remained uncertain, one truth was already clear. Vanessa had met her match, whether she realized it yet or not. The plane had settled into a steady rhythm, engines humming a constant lullaby as the flight climbed higher above the clouds. Jalen tried to focus on the view outside his window, the brilliant white of the snow-covered landscape stretching endlessly below, sparkling in the sunlight like a frozen ocean. Yet, despite the beauty, a persistent knot of anxiety tugged at him. Vanessa's presence was an invisible weight across the aisle, her gaze occasionally flicking toward him like a predator checking on prey. Ethan noticed it too, of course. His cousin's nervous hand twitching against the armrest was enough to make him frown. He leaned in closer, whispering, "Ignore her, Jay. She's all show. She thinks she can scare us because we're kids. She doesn't know Sienna is watching." Jalen nodded, but it didn't entirely ease the tension. Vanessa's eyes followed every movement, her smirk growing wider whenever the boys fidgeted. There was a venomous satisfaction in her stare, the kind that came from someone who believed the world owed them superiority. She cleared her throat, loudly enough to catch a few passengers' attention. "I mean, look at them. Tiny little kids, sitting in first class like they've earned it," she said, voice laced with fake amusement. "This is a plane for adults, you know, people who have actually accomplished something." The words stung. Jalen's hands curled around the edge of the tray table, nails pressing into the polished surface. He hated the way Vanessa made him feel small, yet Ethan's hand resting lightly on his shoulder reminded him that he wasn't facing this alone. Ethan leaned back, his expression calm but sharp. "You're really going to keep talking like that?" he said, voice low but cutting. "These tiny little kids are more grown up than you, in ways you'll never understand." Vanessa scoffed, tilting her head. "Oh, really? And what exactly makes you think that? Sitting here, playing dress-up?" Ethan smiled, but there was a spark of defiance in it. "No, standing up for my cousin. Something you clearly don't know how to do." Vanessa's smirk faltered. She wasn't used to confrontation from someone so young, someone she assumed would cower under her words. The slightest crack in her composure gave Ethan more confidence, and Jalen felt it too, a warmth of protection spreading through him. Sienna, ever observant, was already moving subtly. She circled the aisle, pretending to adjust the service trays and check on other passengers. But her eyes remained locked on Vanessa. She could feel the rising tension, like electricity. Vanessa's behavior was escalating, and while it hadn't yet crossed the threshold of an official incident, Sienna knew it was only a matter of time before a decisive intervention would be necessary. Vanessa's next move came during the meal service, as Jalen carefully unwrapped the small Christmas-themed meal tray. Vanessa leaned across the aisle, lowering her voice so only the boys could hear. "I hope you didn't expect anyone to take you seriously in these ridiculous outfits. You look like clowns." Jalen froze, his fork hovering midair. The sting of embarrassment burned across his cheeks. Ethan's expression darkened, the calmness replaced by a protective fierceness that had already begun to define him in situations like this. "Clowns, huh?" Ethan replied evenly, his tone smooth but deadly in its subtle venom. "Funny, because the only person acting ridiculous here is you, yelling at two kids for wearing Christmas outfits. That's really pathetic." Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. She opened her mouth to respond, but Sienna, who had been monitoring closely, approached with a polite but authoritative stride. "Ma'am," she said, placing a hand gently on the back of her service cart, as if it were an extension of her authority. I've noticed your repeated comments toward these passengers. I must insist you stop immediately." Vanessa blinked, irritation flickering across her face. "I'm just speaking my mind," she said, voice a little higher than intended. Sienna's gaze hardened, unwavering. "Speaking your mind is acceptable, but harassment is not. These children are under my supervision, and I take my responsibilities seriously. If your behavior continues, I will have no choice but to escalate this matter to the captain and ground authorities." The air around Vanessa seemed to tighten. She had expected resistance. Of course, passengers occasionally grumbled. Crew occasionally enforced rules, but she hadn't expected the calm authority that radiated from Sienna. Her confidence, combined with the clear purpose behind her presence, unsettled Vanessa in ways she couldn't hide. Jalen exhaled quietly. "Thank you," he whispered again, glancing at Sienna with gratitude. Ethan gave him a brief nod, his own eyes scanning Vanessa as though daring her to try anything further. But Vanessa wasn't finished. After the meal trays were cleared, she leaned back, crossing her arms and glaring at the boys. "You think you're safe because some flight attendant is watching you. Please, you're not special. No one here thinks you're special." Ethan's patience snapped. He leaned forward slightly, smirking with the sharpness of a teenage version of a lion protecting its own. "You're really overestimating yourself," he said. "Special, maybe not, but annoying people like you, yeah, we've got that covered." Jalen bit back a laugh, amazed at how Ethan could so effortlessly turn the tables, but Sienna's eyes flicked toward them. A subtle shake of her head warned them to stay cautious. The confrontation wasn't over, but she trusted the boys to stay calm under her guidance. As the plane continued its journey, Vanessa's frustration began to manifest in other ways. She muttered to herself, threw sharp glances at the boys, and even attempted to enlist the sympathy of nearby passengers with quiet whispers. However, none of her efforts gained traction. Sienna remained vigilant, intercepting any interaction before it could escalate. Hours into the flight, the tension hit a breaking point. Vanessa leaned too far across the aisle, attempting to knock Jalen's Christmas-themed water bottle off the tray. In a deliberate act of provocation, Jalen recoiled, but Ethan's hand shot out, steadying the bottle and giving Vanessa a cold stare. Sienna had been waiting for this exact moment. She approached swiftly, her presence commanding attention. "That is enough," she said firmly. "I have warned you, ma'am. You are endangering the comfort and safety of passengers, and this behavior will not continue. Please return to your seat immediately." Vanessa's face flushed with anger and humiliation. She opened her mouth to argue, but Sienna's eyes, sharp and unyielding, stopped her. Around the cabin, passengers watched the quiet showdown. Sensing the rising drama, some leaned forward slightly, curious. Others avoided eye contact, but none challenged. Sienna, Vanessa, realizing she was cornered, muttered something under her breath and slumped back into her seat, scowling. It was a small victory for the boys, but Sienna knew this was only the beginning. Vanessa's sense of entitlement would not allow her to let the incident go quietly, and the rest of the flight could easily become a battlefield if she was not carefully managed. Jalen let out a shaky laugh. "I didn't think she could actually be stopped," he whispered. Ethan grinned. "Trust me, she's never met anyone like Sienna before. Or us," he added with a wink, as the hours passed. The plane moved steadily above a blanket of clouds, the sun dipping lower toward the horizon. The cabin was bathed in a warm orange glow, giving the scene an almost magical Christmas aura. Despite Vanessa's lingering hostility, a sense of safety began to settle over the boys. They were still under threat, yes, but now they had allies, protection, and a growing confidence in themselves and each other. The bond between Jalen and Ethan deepened as the flight continued. They shared quiet jokes, subtle glances, and moments of reassurance. Every time Vanessa tried to provoke them, they responded not with fear, but with calm defiance or sometimes a well-timed comment that showcased Ethan's sharp wit. Jalen felt a new strength within him, the realization that courage often came not from being fearless, but from standing up despite fear. Meanwhile, Sienna maintained her watchful eye. She moved through the cabin like a guardian spirit, always alert, always ready. She was the line of defense between Vanessa and the boys. But she also understood the importance of letting them find their own strength. Her subtle guidance allowed Ethan to assert himself, giving Jalen a role model right beside him. The tension, though mitigated, simmered like a pot left on low heat. Vanessa's envy and malice hadn't disappeared. They had simply been contained for now. But both cousins and Sienna knew that confrontation was far from over. Every glance Vanessa shot them, every muttered word, was a reminder that the conflict had only begun, and the true test of courage and cleverness was still ahead. The flight continued over the winter landscape, distant mountains, rising like white peaks against the horizon. Inside, the cabin was quiet, yet charged with an unspoken drama. Jalen felt a strange thrill amid the fear, a mix of anticipation, nerves, and the empowering knowledge that he was not alone. He looked at Ethan, at Sienna, and realized that together they were stronger than Vanessa could ever imagine. As the first hints of evening settled over the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold, a sense of calm confidence took root. The boys could endure this. Vanessa could throw her words, her smirks, her attempts to humiliate, but they had each other, and they had Sienna. And somewhere above the clouds, guided by the steady hand of Adrian's plans, they were moving closer to the safety and warmth of their holiday destination. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane reached its cruising altitude, giving the first-class section a warm, cozy glow. The soft hum of the engines was a background symphony to the quiet tension lingering in the air. Jalen sat by the window, hands folded tightly in his lap, eyes darting nervously toward Vanessa, who had been fuming in her seat for what felt like hours. Every time she thought the boys weren't paying attention, she would flash a glare, a reminder of the hostility that had taken root between them. Ethan, sitting firmly beside him, had adopted a protective posture. He had realized that remaining calm and composed was the key to keeping Vanessa in check. But beneath his cool demeanor, a simmering fire of frustration and indignation had been building. He was not going to allow a stranger's cruelty to go unchecked, and he certainly wasn't going to let his cousin feel powerless. Vanessa, for her part, had reached the point where subtle harassment was no longer satisfying her. She wanted attention, dominance, validation for her misguided sense of superiority. Leaning forward, she spoke louder this time, ensuring that several passengers could hear. Really, look at them, sitting there in their little festive costumes, like the world revolves around them. It's pathetic. Jalen's heart sank. He felt the sting of embarrassment and anger rise in equal measure. He wanted to shrink away, to disappear into the plush seat. But a glance at Ethan's unwavering gaze bolstered his courage. Ethan's jaw was tight, his eyes burning with the kind of quiet intensity that made Vanessa hesitate for the first time. "You know, Vanessa," Ethan said, his voice calm but razor-sharp, "it's really fascinating. You spend all this energy trying to make kids feel small. And for what? A sense of superiority you clearly don't earn. You might want to sit down and think about that." Vanessa's cheeks flushed crimson. She had expected fear, flinching, tears even, but not a direct challenge from a 14-year-old boy. "Excuse me," she spat, leaning closer, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You heard me," Ethan said smoothly, his tone deceptively casual. "Maybe try treating people with respect instead of wasting your energy on jealousy. Just a thought." Jalen's eyes widened in awe. He hadn't known Ethan could be so bold, so effortlessly commanding. It gave him a spark of courage, and for the first time, he dared to lift his chin, meeting Vanessa's gaze with steady eyes. Sienna had been watching closely, moving quietly among the aisles, subtly observing Vanessa's escalating temper. She could feel the tension crackling like a storm about to break. Vanessa had crossed the line several times now, ignoring polite warnings. And Sienna knew the moment for decisive action had arrived. She didn't like having to escalate situations, but protecting the boys was her primary responsibility. Vanessa, clearly rattled by Ethan's composure, muttered under her breath, "You little brats think you can talk to me like that." Ethan smirked, leaning back in his seat. "We're not brats. We're family. And you're about to learn that making kids your target isn't the smartest move." The cabin fell into an uneasy silence. The few nearby passengers observing the unfolding drama with curiosity and apprehension. Vanessa's face contorted with fury, her fingers clenching the armrest like she wanted to lash out physically. Sienna stepped forward, her voice firm and commanding. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. Your behavior is completely unacceptable, and I am asking you to return to your seat and refrain from further harassment. Any continued actions will result in you being removed from the flight." Vanessa's lips twisted in defiance. "You can't tell me what to do. Who do you think you are? I am your authority on this plane regarding the safety and comfort of all passengers, including these children," Sienna said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "And I assure you, I am serious." Jalen felt a swell of gratitude for Sienna. She was calm, poised, and utterly unyielding. The fear that had gripped him earlier began to ebb, replaced by confidence, knowing he was under the protection of someone capable and determined. Ethan gave his cousin a reassuring nudge, whispering, "See, she's about to learn a lesson she won't forget." Vanessa, humiliated by Sienna's unshakable stance, decided to lash out one last time. She reached toward Jalen's tray, attempting to knock over his water bottle deliberately, but Ethan's hand shot out instinctively, steadying it while his eyes blazed with controlled fury. "That's it," Ethan said, voice low and dangerous. "You've officially lost whatever control you thought you had here." Sienna moved swiftly, standing directly between Vanessa and the boys. Her posture was firm, her authority undeniable. "Ma'am, you are no longer permitted to remain on this flight if you continue this behavior. I am contacting the captain now." Vanessa's face turned an alarming shade of red, a mix of embarrassment, rage, and fear. She realized, perhaps too late, that she had miscalculated. Her insults, her superiority complex, and her attempts to humiliate these two young teenagers had all backfired spectacularly. I, Vanessa stammered, at a loss for words. She hadn't anticipated a confrontation she couldn't dominate. Ethan leaned closer to Jalen, whispering with a grin, "Watch this. It's about to get even better." Sienna's phone buzzed quietly in her hand. She had already notified the captain of the situation, detailing Vanessa's harassment and her refusal to comply with warnings. Within minutes, the announcement came over the intercom. "Attention passengers. Due to safety concerns, a disruptive passenger will be escorted off the flight upon landing. We thank you for your understanding." Vanessa's face drained of color as murmurs rippled through the cabin. Other passengers, who had observed her behavior, exchanged knowing glances. Some smiled subtly at the poetic justice unfolding before them. She could no longer maintain her pretense of superiority. The social and authoritative consequences were catching up to her. Jalen exhaled slowly, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. "I can't believe that just happened," he whispered to Ethan. Ethan chuckled softly, his grin wide. "Believe it. Jay, you just watched someone get their ego deflated by a combination of family and authority." Despite the victory, Sienna remained vigilant. She knew Vanessa's anger hadn't disappeared. It had only been contained. But for now, the boys were safe, and the threat had been neutralized long enough for the remainder of the flight to proceed without incident. The cabin's atmosphere shifted subtly, a mixture of tension dissipating and relief settling in. Jalen felt a warmth spread through him, not just from surviving Vanessa's bullying, but from witnessing his cousin step up in a way that was fearless, strategic, and protective. As the flight continued over the wintry landscape below, the boys began to relax slightly, focusing on the view and the festive atmosphere. The soft glow of Christmas lights lining the cabin gave a sense of magic, a reminder that despite human cruelty, there was also warmth, protection, and care in the world. Vanessa slumped back in her seat, defeated but not entirely humiliated. She had underestimated the courage and composure of two 14-year-old boys, the unwavering authority of a competent flight attendant, and the strength that came from family bonds. Her lesson was clear. Though she wouldn't admit it aloud, appearances and entitlement mean nothing when confronted with real integrity and protection. Jalen glanced at Ethan, a mix of admiration and pride in his eyes. "Thanks for standing up for me," he said quietly. Ethan shrugged modestly. Wouldn't let her get away with it. That's what cousins are for. Sienna, observing quietly from a few steps away, allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The situation had been handled without physical conflict, without panic, and without endangering the children. Her vigilance had paid off, and the boys had begun to understand the value of courage, solidarity, and standing up against injustice. The remainder of the flight passed with less tension, though Vanessa remained sullen and silent. Her attempts to engage, to provoke, or to garner sympathy were futile against the calm authority that surrounded the boys. For Jalen and Ethan, the experience became a lesson in courage, resilience, and the importance of family support in the face of adversity. By the time the plane began its descent, the orange and pink hues of the setting sun reflected off the clouds, painting the cabin in a warm, festive light. The boys were ready mentally and emotionally for the end of the journey. They had faced hostility, stood their ground, and emerged stronger. And as the landing gears extended and the ground drew near, a quiet sense of accomplishment filled the first-class cabin.